Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am glad to introduce my guest today. She is the developer of the Good Divorce Experience, and her name is Karen McNenny. She's a mediator, divorce coach, and therapist dedicated to transforming how families navigate through divorce. She also helps couples not only get divorced, but learn how to maintain healthy post-divorce relationships, especially when children are involved. With more than 25 years of expertise, Karen focuses on co-parenting, financial planning, and relationship literacy, guiding families towards compassionate outcome. She's a TEDx speaker and host of the Good Divorce Show podcast. Karen draws from her own divorce journey to offer hope and healing. She lives in Montana with her family and dog and enjoys the outdoors in the Rocky Mountains. With that, let's get to Karen.
Thank you for having me. So delighted to be one of the experts.
Yes, this is such an important topic because I think divorce can go so poorly sometimes, right? It feels bad and can be so hard, or it could be good. And you're here today to help us with that.
Yes, surprisingly enough, you can have a good divorce, but we don't talk about it or amplify that message or quite honestly teach families how to have a good divorce.
Yes. Well, I think in fairness, we don't teach people how to be married, right?
Yeah.
So we definitely are not getting to the point of teaching them how to be divorced.
Or how to pick a partner that we're highly compatible with for the long run. And yes, there's lots of these life skill things that could probably deserve a little more attention.
Yes. But here we are, right? And so we're going to talk about how to do a good divorce. Can you explain what that means and the difference between having a good divorce and maybe what the typical family experience is?
Well, just starting with that option, which is you can have a dumpster fire, high conflict, spend a lot of money, years, kids in the middle divorce, or you can have a good divorce.
Yeah.
Which one would you choose? And I think, the important thing to remember in shifting our paradigm as we think about it is that divorce is not a weapon. It's a tool. But our society and culture emphasizes the weaponization of, oh, you're going through divorce. That means one thing. You're going to lawyer up and fight and be enemies with your co-parent if you share children, which happens to be my area of expertise. Although I work with families, couples that don't have children, but we already get off on the wrong foot in a couple of ways. One, I think people stay too long. We often know we have an expiration date and we stay past it and things start getting worse and worse and worse because we don't see an elegant exit. We haven't offered families an elegant exit to a marriage that has either become high conflict or become highly apathetic, both of which can be difficult environments for kids to grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing, is recognizing your expiration date and trying not to ignore it, and leaving before destruction begins, leaving before you're already on enemy lines. And I think sometimes we do stay longer than is maybe healthy because we think it needs to be on fire, burnt down, terrible, high conflict to justify the divorce.
Mm-hmm.
But if we think about divorce as a tool of transformation, not a tool or a weapon of destruction, I should say, and that we know that there's a relationship that is eroding, and that the home in which our kids are growing up in now does not have the best version of their parents, as a result of that mismatched marriage. And I really think so often marriages come down to we're not compatible around money, intimacy, child rearing, roommates. How many couples I meet, like, we're just terrible roommates. And some of us didn't know that when we said I do, because it's so easy to get married and so hard to get divorced.
So true.
So seeing that as a tool of transformation that we're going to renovate the family to improve the primary relationship between the parents, not make it worse. If you want to make it worse, stay too long, let the destruction start to happen until you really hate each other, which then you can justify your divorce, then go find two lawyers who want to litigate and just make a lot of money off of your pain. And not all lawyers certainly are wired that way, but I would say generally speaking, lawyers are doing precisely what they have been trained to do, which is to fight for their client, no matter what, right? That is their obligation, is to fight for their singular client. But when that client is opposing counsel, is a person they had a love story with, that they married, that they share children with, they have a forever relationship with, why would we want to do damage to those individuals? And those lawyers are operating in a legal system that by its very nature is defined by adversary, right? Is defined by conflict. And so when we drop families into that story, we can expect a lot of destruction. So the good divorce experience that I've developed, I work with mom and dad from the day they've decided, and we move through that process together, and they engage with experts along the way as needed. We absolutely need lawyers to get us legally divorced in terms of documentation and filing with the courts. But lawyers do very little by way of teaching us how to be divorced and how to be a high functioning family that happens to live across two homes.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely am part of a lot of divorces happening, right? Like I am on the kids side of things, being a child therapist, and I see a lot of people who go into wanting a divorce and they're like, we're going to try to do this amicably. And it doesn't seem to turn out that way, right? Lawyers get involved. There's lots of feelings. Like we're discussing finances. We're discussing who's going to have the kids on what dates, and like feelings get involved, and it gets big really fast.
Well, and the amicable approach, and my husband and I, that was absolutely, we were in agreement. We were both sad. We comforted each other once we really arrived at that decision. But we didn't see the need for lawyers because we were going to have 50-50 custody, and we were not going to participate in spousal support or child support. We were going to both take care of ourselves, be financially independent within our own home, and share every expense 50-50 and share those kids 50-50 across the homes. And we've gone from kindergarten to college, 15 years under that arrangement. But I'll tell you what, Bryce, the twist is that in the end, we floundered for probably 20 months on our own, trying to do the documentation, to get the things written up, and we couldn't do it. It was doing more damage because we didn't have a third party. We didn't have a coach, a consultant, until finally we had to hire two lawyers just to get the paperwork done. I never met his lawyer. We were never in a courtroom together. They talked to each other. We talked to our lawyer and they wrote it up. So we were grateful that way. But it would have been good from the beginning to have had a guide. And so ultimately here I am 15 years later, having built the business that I was looking for, the support that Michael and I were looking for at the time that we divorced, which was, we don't need a lawyer to separate our assets. We need a guide to help us do as little damage as possible as we renovate our family across two homes.
Yeah, I love that terminology. I think I think parents don't know what to expect when they go into the place of having a divorce, except for just chaos, right? Things are going to get bad or worse, and the kids suffer a lot of times seeing their parents struggling and going back and forth and negative things. And I think I love this approach. So talk to me about, you often say that the marriage can be over, but the relationship is forever. I like that because it's so true, especially when children are involved. What mindset shifts do parents need in order to make that co-parenting truly
parenting,
Yeah.
right? I don't know how it's together, right? After a divorce.
Yes. Well, you've really nailed, I'm gonna just approach this differently. Yeah, I think your clarity, Bryce, around that long-term relationship is really key, and just shifting our paradigm. So when I start working with a couple, the first thing we agree to is do no more harm.
Mm,
Every email, every text message, every roll of the eye, how you talk about your former spouse publicly, how you talk about them with your children, even how you let them rest in your heart, because there was a love story. So when we can bring people back to that place, and just because you're getting divorced doesn't mean that the love story didn't matter, or that it wasn't love. It was a chapter, it was a season.
mhm.
So first identifying, we're not going to do any more harm to this relationship. Enough has probably already been done on our way to deciding that we're going to be divorced. And then, yes, I do tell all of my clients, I said, your marriage is done, not your relationship.
Mhm.
If you share children, you are in relationship to some degree forever, from graduation to grandbabies to weddings and
Mhm.
funerals. And I have interviewed adult children of divorce in their 30s and 40s who will tell me, my divorced parents ruined my wedding day. My divorced parents will still not come to my house together at Christmas to see their grandchildren. My divorce, and it goes on and on. And we're like, who wrote that playbook? That's a
Yeah.
terrible playbook. A lot of it was written in the 70s and 80s,
Mhm.
right? As we were coming through the 60s, women were going back to work, more independence, realizing, oh, women now can have their own bank account. They can have their own credit card. They have been domestically bound, and that might have rattled some of those marriages to go, hey, you know what? I want something different and more than what this is. But we were not very skilled at guiding families at that time.
Mhm.
So setting out and recognizing, if I'm going to be connected to this person forever, if that's our starting point, then what do I want that to look like? And I tell my clients two important things in terms of our working agreement. One, I work for your children. They're my client.
Mhm.
And my job is to protect their future and to keep the two of you from doing damage to that future and your relationship as you move through the divorce process.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of the place I take too, because I am a child therapist. And so, like my client is your kid, right? And so I am going to go to that relationship first, right? That's my priority. And I can give advice around that, but your kids' happiness and well-being are my primary objective, which I
Yeah.
think is helpful because the adults can take care of themselves, but it's the
Yes.
kids who need us to show
Yes.
up.
And people are famous for saying divorce destroys children. They'll all be traumatized. Their whole future will be a mess. And I want to say divorce isn't what damages kids. It's grown-ups behaving badly.
Yes.
Whether you're married or unmarried, that's
Mhm.
what damages children.
Yes.
And you know that as a child therapist.
Yes.
And divorce, absolutely, it shows up on ACEs, our adverse childhood experiences, but it doesn't have to be a capital T trauma. It can be a small t trauma.
Yeah.
And it is the responsibility of the parents to do that on behalf of their children,
Mhm.
and to know that every child, they have rights. It's not about parental rights to my kid. Children have rights to have equal access to their parents and to build those relationships without interference by the other parent.
Yes. Yeah.
When we have healthy parents, we always know, unless we have addiction issues, we have abuse issues, we have incarceration, right?
Sure.
Those are special, unique circumstances, and we want to be very thoughtful and protective. But there's a lot of us ordinary folk like myself who just need to get unmarried.
Yes.
But we want our children to have their full, delightful childhood with both parents sitting side by side in the grandstands, cheering them on and smiling together
Yes.
as parents.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, and I was just thinking as you were saying, big T trauma versus little T trauma, which is something I talk about a lot in EMDR, which is just about how people perceive it. But I think and how I mean, sometimes little T trauma can be very personal, but still feel big. I
Yes.
but I think, what would be interesting is to like shift that thought about that. It's not the divorce that actually caused what we would say is like trauma. It's
Mhm.
just that moving is hard, right? Living in two houses can be hard, right? Maybe you have to switch schools. Like those parts are the piece. It's not, it would be great if it wasn't actually your parents getting divorced. That was the part that felt traumatic. It was just that your family was restructured and then other things changed. And wouldn't that be lovely if those were things like moving, where that has very little to do with the kid, has very little to do with the parents? It's like a new job or whatever, right? Like lots of families move, lots of parents change jobs, lots of families move to different houses, right? But I think if we're doing divorce well, it sounds like we can keep that part from being the trauma if as adults we're showing up as adults, right? Which can be very hard, right? If we haven't done our own work, showing up to that playing field as a grown up, right, can be very difficult. And it also, if we have people on the sidelines saying, this is what you should do, right? Like you should fight for this. Don't let them do that. Like this is what the right way to do that is. What advice do you give to people when, and like outside people, like their family or friends are telling them, don't listen to your divorce coach. Listen to me. This is what you should do. You're going to get taken advantage of or whatever.
Yes. I refer to those as the shadow figures, and they are often well intended. So, again, right off the bat in the good divorce experience, really believing that in early intervention and prevention
Mhm.
is part of what makes a good divorce possible. So, what I mean by that specifically with shadow figures, so a couple decides on a Sunday, that's it. We've done all the things. We've been to all the therapy. We've done the retreats. We're just going to throw in the towel, okay? And they call me on a Monday. And they're like, "Now what?" And usually it starts with, "We have to tell our kids. That's the first thing we have to tell our kids." I'm like, "Well, probably not the first thing, because there's a lot of things you don't have answers to yet,
Mhm.
and other people who need to be informed actually before your children." So we're going to push pause on that for a moment. And we're going to look at the circle of support around you and the children, which means a communication that probably is going to go to teachers and coaches, ballet teachers, right? Extracurricular,
Mhm.
those people who are directly involved in the kid's life and might notice a behavior change after those kids are notified of the divorce. We also just recently, I wrote basically a public service announcement about the couple's divorce that went to 35 of their closest friends. They were very forward facing in the community. They had a business that they were getting ready to sell. They didn't want a lot of gossip. They didn't want all the drama. They didn't want everyone in their business. I'm like, well, let's, right. This comes from my background as a business consultant, which is when you're going to lead change, you get ahead of the communication. Because when
Mhm.
people don't have information, they just make stuff up. And it
That's
is
true.
often much worse than what the truth is.
Mhm.
So we write our own headlines and stay ahead of the press. So that couple, in concert with me, we wrote an email. That's how they decided to send it, just announcing, "We are so sorry to share our news today that we've decided to dissolve our marriage. As you can well appreciate, this was not a decision that came easily or quickly. We want you to know that we will not be going to battle with each other. We will
Mhm.
not be lawyering up, and you will not find us in the headlines around dramatic divorces. We're working with," and whoever they might be working with, if it is within the coach world, they'll put my website and say, "We're working with a divorce consultant." And in doing so, it means that we are able to design our own divorce. And when you see us in the grocery store, please don't dodge us and go down the cereal aisle and avoid the conversation. Divorce is not contagious. So you can come to us.
Mhm.
And all that we ask is that you do not ask why we're getting divorced, but you can
Mhm.
ask us how we're doing. You can ask us what we need as a family. And we'll be telling our children, right? Usually this is 5 days or a week before. Our kids don't know yet, but we wanted you to know so that there aren't surprises when our kids are chatting. And furthermore, there's no need to take a side. unless it's the side of our children, because that's
Mhm.
the side both of us will be on together. Thank you for your support and your love. And you don't need to know where our kids are when you want to play date. You can just text both of us, just like always. Right. So we're training that community
Mhm.
before they even get any wild ideas.
Yes.
So there's preventative measures. But let's say you're in the heat of it and you're having lunch with your besties and they're like, what do you mean you don't have a lawyer? Which has happened. Sometimes we have to write letters to the grandmas and grandpas,
Mhm.
because they're the ones who want to get right in there. And then we say, thank you so much for your concern and your love. I know it comes from a well-intended place, but we're finding it most beneficial if we just manage those details on our own with our team that is helping us to dissolve our marriage.
Yeah.
But you can bring a casserole if you really care about us. You can send a cleaning person just to give me some support on the lonely days. You can ask me out when my kids are gone to join your dinner party with everyone else,
Mhm.
right? So often those people going through divorce become a little bit invisible as we move into the kind of that cave of shame and isolation that so
Mhm.
often comes with divorce.
Mhm. Yeah, I think people don't know what to do, right? They kind of feel like, okay, I don't want to pick a side or I'm not sure, right? And my strategy is always just like ask, and if they don't want to come, then they'll decline,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
Like you don't have to make the decision for them. Let them decide for themselves what they feel comfortable with and go on as normal. I love that, to not have to pick a side and to pick the kid's side. Like, ah, that was so eloquently written.
Yeah, we're gonna educate those folks. And I know for me early on, especially, my friends and neighbors would still invite me to events. And if I didn't have my kids when that potluck was happening, I often would not go
Mm.
because I had this like phantom shadow, it's like a phantom pain. I felt the absence of my children even more strongly when I was at a potluck in the park where everyone else was with their kids.
Mhm.
So I collected a lot of retired friends and friends without kids uh,
Mhm.
during my divorce recovery, because I didn't have to navigate that absence of motherhood that was such a dominant identifier for me, for all of those years
Yeah.
before you become a part-time parent, which is a
Yeah.
very significant transition.
Yes. Yeah, I think it can be so hard because when you have your kids all the time and then you go to having them half the time or a different schedule, but like,
Mhm.
like that can be so hard to navigate of like you don't know how to do life. Like you just are figuring out how to do the parenting thing, co-parenting thing like within your same household, right? And then when you divide it, it can feel so lonely and
Mhm.
we can self-isolate, right? Where we just kind of like put ourselves in a box of like, we don't feel comfortable going out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I love your approach because it's different than most people's approaches because you have both the therapy knowledge, you have the mediation knowledge and the coaching knowledge, and you're kind of putting it in this multidisciplinary approach, which is so helpful to couples, I think. Um, and your help is to not just get divorced, but to be divorced in a healthier way. Can you talk a little bit more about how your approach is different?
Yes, as you identified, I kind of do everything for the family except write legal documents or manage financial spreadsheets. And either we have a neutral lawyer, and there
Mhm.
are many of them around the country who just know that we're going to show up with decisions already made. So I'm doing progressive mediation with that couple. They literally are designing their own divorce. It's this self determination to say, no, why don't, I'll take these two old cars. You keep that one new car. That
Mhm.
feels appropriate for us. Um,
Mhm.
and they're not in, they're in the intent of helping each other succeed because, again, both parents are still attached to the children. So we want both parents to be successful in that way. And I will guide a family through the entire process. So, as I said, one of the first things we do is their communication strategy. Teachers, coaches, friends, immediate family, sometimes even the parents of the kiddos' friends. So, little Johnny's best friend, Jessica. Well, we don't want Jessica's parents to be surprised when she comes home and says, Johnny's parents are getting divorced. Are you guys getting divorced? Because little
Mhm.
kids think it is contagious.
Yes.
So we do that. We start talking about real estate because the home is one of the very first things. that's going to come up. Where's everyone going to live? What can we afford? And again, that's going to be one of the first questions from your kiddo. So we don't start having a conversation with kids until you've got some answers in place.
Mhm.
We might need to help a family guide them through a variety of different living arrangements as they unravel the sweater that has been knitted together. So they might be cohabitating still when I get their phone call, right? And that actually is my favorite time. Like before you tell anyone, before you do anything, you've just decided,
Mhm.
because we might need a cohabitation schedule that gives mom and dad a little more space. They might be living in two separate rooms in the house. Who's
Mhm.
in charge of lunches? Who's in charge of after school pickup? What,
Mhm.
okay, this weekend I'm gonna disappear and go visit friends. We might move to a nesting schedule where the kids stay put, but the parents are coming and going for a time before we get that next permanent construct for the family, that structure, because
Mhm.
it takes time to look at the financials. It takes time to get a house on the market if you're selling, or if the other one party is buying the other out. So all of those things are happening. Once we're in the structure of two homes, we work on a schedule. What is the right residential schedule? Do you have little kids? Then it's maybe 2 or 3 days at a time. If you have older kids, a week at a time. Oh, you've got teenagers, they're going to resist and refuse any of this nonsense
Hmm.
because they're
Mhm.
living right where their game system is set up and all their favorite jeans. And I've got my jewelry and my ghetto lights and right. And they're like, well, we're not doing any of this nonsense. And sometimes that's appropriate. So we're looking at where your kids are in their own age development. And then getting that family through the financial separation. That's when we sometimes will invite a certified divorce financial analyst to work directly with us. They're a neutral party who just is great with those spreadsheets and helps you to see how different tax treatments might affect your settlement. And then, of course, working with that neutral lawyer. So I might be with a couple 3 to 6, maybe even 9 months. I like to move families through the process as swiftly as possible because we know when you're dwelling and
Mhm.
languishing in an unpleasant place, it's another opportunity to cause harm and more conflict between the couple themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, so how often do divorces go pretty quickly? Like, can you get somebody like that is cooperative, that is working towards the goals, a divorce in 6 months?
Oh, yes. The families I've worked with tend to come in 3, 6, or 9-month cycles, depending on the complexity. I had a family that was with me for just 3 months, and I meet with the couple either together or individually every week. I'm in touch with them every week. Again, if you are working only with a lawyer, they're probably going to get to you every 6 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks.
Mhm.
Huge caseloads, but I cap my caseload so that I can give that undivided attention and move people through quickly.
Yes.
One couple came to me, they'd already been living apart for a year. They didn't own a home together. They had kiddos, not a lot of assets. They just needed to get the legal documentation done. Dad was thinking about moving, talking about would they move together, what that might look like, and very straightforward. I had another couple, more complicated. They owned a business together. They had other investors in their business. There was a corporate lawyer involved in those components. But even with that, and they had kids, they were young adults, heading, college aged. So we weren't working on a parenting plan in the same way. But as a caveat, you're still parenting at 18. Those
Oh,
kids
yeah.
are not off the hook. There is a lot going on from 18 to 25, and parents dismiss that. But even that couple, I was with them for 9 to 10 months max. Um, so it
Amazing.
does really depend on the efforts of the family and how much struggle. And then sometimes schedules, right? There might be a Thanksgiving and a Christmas break in the middle of our work, and we're just going to take a divorce holiday for the month of December and just not meet, not talk about it. Status quo, keep the wheels on the bus. I'll see you in the new year.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so I was thinking about as families go through this, like it sounds great. I love all of this. Some families feel, though, as they get divorced, that they go through financial devastation, right? Dividing their assets can really feel difficult. Not to mention the like emotional tax, we'll say, that is taken from getting divorced. What do you, how does your model address this part of like financially, like especially feeling like you were on your feet and now maybe you're not because of the financial position that you're put in?
Mhm.
How do you guys work through that?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. The first, which is just the sad, bitter pill of divorce. You are about to take everything that you have grown together and divide it in half,
Yep.
right? Most states are community states, so everything that was established, earned during the divorce. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving any specific advice, but generally speaking, we're going to divide. So if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I have less, this is hard. Well, that's the reality of divorce.
Mhm.
And ideally, both parents are at an equal struggle as they rebuild their independent life, not an imbalance of the teeter-totter where someone came up way high and got the shark lawyer and I took it all and I'm going to get more and I'm going to get spousal and I'm going to get child support and oh, look at them, they're really suffering. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
Why is that the goal? That should never be the goal,
Yeah.
right? If there was financial infidelity and gross uh, imbalance in the marriage, that's when you turn to lawyers to equalize. Um, and if that's the case, I always recommend a collaborative process where you each have your lawyer at the table all the time. You agree not to go to court, and those lawyers are collaborating on your behalf, right? That's what they're, that when we talk about collaborative law in the divorce process, it's about a team of people supporting the parents in collaboration. They're not fighting against each other because those lawyers know nobody's going to court. We got to get this
Yeah.
sucker buttoned up.
Mhm.
So the bitter pill is your finances are going to be stretched. You're going to divide your assets in half, and then you also are moving from a two-income household to a single income household.
Mhm.
Or maybe you were a one-income household with a stay-at-home parent or a part-time parent, but now you are on your own. And what you might do to generate your own support, right? Beyond possibly what might be agreed upon. Um, through child support or spousal support. And again, I'm not an expert in the spreadsheets. When I come to the financials, I look through the lens of this is one of those math story problems.
Mhm.
If mom takes the Jeep and dad takes the old truck and the Volkswagen, will the teeter-totter be balanced? Yes or no, right? If this, then that, and
Mhm.
how to equalize that. And then we bring in the financial professional, which sometimes is the attorney who has the knowledge for that particular case. Sometimes we have to look um, into other professionals, and real estate is another expert that we're going to come in. Mortgage lenders, as well as agents if we're selling. People have 1031 exchanges in their property and there's tax implications. Oh, we want a divorce in January, but we want to file taxes together for this year because of, well, then you need to stay married the whole year, but we're going to do it right. So as you can see, Bryce, there's so
Mhm.
many elements to the financial picture that we want to make sure, certainly in the good divorce experience, that we always have the right financial expert on board.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Tricky. It sounds like a place I would not live in terms of like being the financial part. I would say out of that as well.
And it's gonna hurt. It's just gonna hurt. And a lot of times I have families who are, one party's wanting to keep that family home. And we don't always have the right policies in our country, for instance, around mortgages. So if you and I owned a house, Bryce, together, and the terms of our mortgage was a 3.75% interest rate because we bought it when interest was really low. Well,
Mhm.
now you're going to leave the home. I actually qualify to still pay that mortgage. I still qualify alone on my income. It would be great if I could just assume the terms of those loans through my qualification. But that's not what typically happens. Those banks and those lenders want you to refinance the whole thing, which is a
Mhm.
$5,000 to $10,000 fees, appraisals, all
Mhm.
the hoops, the filing, la, 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 it goes on and on. Plus, when I refinance, my terms change to the terms of today. So my
Mhm.
3.5% APR is now 7%. Oh, guess what? I can no longer afford that mortgage.
Yeah.
Now the family loses the home altogether.
Mhm.
I'm calling you out, lenders. I'm calling you out, real estate bankers. We need to be more supportive of families to help them find a way to stay in their homes. So these are and again, these are all the little tentacles that create the story for that family going forward, which is much more than just dividing assets.
Yeah. Yep. Does get complicated. Yeah, there's a lot of pieces. Okay, so what do you think are some common mistakes that couples make when they're going through a divorce, especially when kids are involved, but just in general, that they could maybe, let's say, course correct, right? Like they could, and hearing this podcast, they could be like, okay, we can make this shift or make this change in
Mhm.
our family right now.
Yeah. So, if you're happen to be a high conflict family, and you're still not having healthy conversations around your kids, other than a text message that says "pick up at 3, drop off at 5," um, you can consider co-parent counseling.
Mm.
And I would turn specifically to parentteam.com. That is the curriculum that I am trained in as a co-parent specialist. And there is a network of coaches who will meet with families post-divorce. I've been meeting with a family that's 3 years after their divorce, and they're running into trouble. So get a third party, like this kind of podcast. There are experts out there who can sit with you and help you to have that conversation,
Mhm.
and be be your own good student of learning, such as accidental experts, right? Oh, we've got a child with ADHD. How do we best support that across two homes? Do we have consistent systems across two
Mhm.
homes? Do we have consistent sleep hygiene and diet? Which doesn't mean you're in charge of the other person's home. Nobody wants to be micromanaged, especially post divorce.
Yeah.
But if you didn't do the work as you were getting divorced to really think about what is that, I call it the home habitat. And if children are living in wildly different habitats, that can be a real stressor for them.
Mhm.
And it's everything from, oh, at this home, I'm expected to do these 6 chores every week. And over here, I don't have to do anything. And I get $25 a week in allowance.
Mm.
Well, now the child is trying to make sense of that through
Mhm.
the value system of their parents that doesn't really align. Could we do something similar in both homes?
Mhm.
One home has a curfew, one home doesn't have a curfew for those young adults.
Mhm.
Consistency with discipline and consequences, right? Little Jackie lost her phone over the weekend because she didn't do any of her homework, and it's too much of a distraction. Oh, but they transitioned to their other home on Monday. Can that co-parent be in agreement that we're going to maintain that consequence, because that's the right thing for that adolescent brain to know, that there will be a consequence and you can earn it back,
Mhm.
not, oh, just flip the switch willy-nilly. So
Mhm.
if that would be one thing in the here and now, is to really think about, have we created a habitat that is comfortable and consistent and predictable for kids across homes?
Yeah, I love that because I do think, I mean, kids are resilient. We know this. Kids can be resilient, but it also is just so much easier to go from one place to the next that has a lot of the same expectations and behaviors, right? That we can do it more seamlessly because it's just easy because it's the same.
Yeah, and I think we're really famous, the collective we in this culture, and those of us in the divorce world, of kids are resilient, they'll be fine. Kids are resilient. It's like, well,
Mhm.
I'm resilient too, and I struggle. And
Mhm.
what we don't want to do is we don't want to gaslight our children around their feelings.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean by that, is when we see someone in our family struggling or being tearful or sad with the news, or this is hard, and we're like, it's okay, it's okay, it's just fine, it's no problem, we both love you, you stop crying. And then as they're struggling, they're thinking, I guess I'm not supposed to feel sad. I guess I'm not supposed to miss my other parent. Oh, all the grown-ups around me are telling me that this is totally fine and normal, and I should just put on a happy face because I'm resilient. And then those kids start to squash that. They question themselves. And then in their 20s and 30s, they find a good therapist to unpack it all. Right, Bryce?
Yes.
Again, early intervention and prevention.
Mhm.
Let your children have the feelings that they're having. And
Mhm.
know, especially like you mentioned, this living across two homes, which a lot of kids are doing, that is not the burden that the children wanted to carry or should have to carry.
Yep.
So that means parents, you find the system to make sure they have what they need in both homes. You check in with those kids, you support each other. If the soccer cleats were forgotten, rather than being passive aggressive, like, well, that other parent never gets together and they never check the soccer practice. And of course, you don't have your cleats today because they're worthless.
Mhm.
Okay, you're angry at your former spouse who still can't read the calendar and remember what day soccer cleats are needed. Probably the same thing when you're married. It's going to
Mhm.
be the same in divorce. They're the same person. But now who's suffering?
Yeah,
Your
that's true.
child who doesn't have the soccer cleats.
Yep.
That's their first point of pain. The second point of pain, this parent is so mean and angry at that other parent and saying mean things about them that now I have a loyal. Where is my loyalty supposed to be?
Mhm.
Because we know kids love both their parents and they need to have positive, loving relationships with both of their parents.
Mhm. Well, and I also find that kids a lot of times will align with the parent that they feel like is being attacked, right?
Yep.
So if,
Or
you're criticizing,
bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right, because then they feel like they're caretakers, and that is not the place that we should allow our kids to be, is to be taking care of grown-ups. They should be able to be kids, and it's our job, even when it's really hard, to show up to take care of our kids, and we also have to take care of ourselves because
That's
that's what we signed up for.
and you find other grown-ups to
Mhm.
vent and support you,
Yeah.
not your children. The child should never be the investigator of the other house, the reporter, the mediator, the communicator about things. They get to just be the kids at
Yep.
any age.
Yep.
And I now have an 18 and a 20-year-old, and we still see that happen. Like, hey, is this going to happen or that going to happen? Did you know? Did what? And we trained our children early on. We gave them the tool to be able to say, huh, sounds like a good question for dad. Boom,
Mhm.
they're out of it.
Love
We
it.
gave them a tool to step out of a place where they're like, "Oh, no, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that dad went with his girlfriend this I don't know if I'm supposed to say we got a new trampoline. I don't know." And the nervous system of those children every time they're put in a situation where they feel like they're being and it might be super casual grown up. You might just be like, "Hey, is dad gonna be around this weekend because I want a such and such." That child, if they just know they can say, "Sounds like you should ask dad about his plans."
Mhm.
Boom. And I wasn't even digging, prying, or looking for anything nefarious. I'm just a grown up thinking out loud, talking to my kids. But
Mhm.
for a child, they often do not want to be the decider, the chooser, or
Mhm.
the one who has to align with either parent. They
Mhm.
get to be neutrally, deeply in love with both parents.
Yes. Love it. Okay, so we talked about moving from that place of conflict to cooperation. If your clients are in that and you're talking about a co-parenting therapist, maybe can we talk about what a parenting therapist does? I think that's really what my next question is, right? Can we talk to people about like what their role is?
Sure. A co-parent counselor, such as myself, who's trained as a parent team expert, certified divorce coach, a co-parenting specialist. So we have understanding of divorce dynamics, and then each couple is going to come, and it's not couples therapy.
Mhm.
Okay. We're not working on the, obviously, the marriage is dissolved or even the relationship. It's what do we need? What systems and strategies do we need to give you as co parents so that there's less conflict?
Mhm.
So, for instance, one family was like, every time I drop off then it's got to be, and we're in the parking lot and chat, and she's done it. And I'm like, oh, so now your new strategy is you never talk business during transition.
Mhm.
So how will you exchange information about the kids? Because that needs to happen and schedules might change or they had a hard day, whatever. Okay, is that on an app like Our Family Wizard? Is it once a week we have a phone call so it's more dynamic? Is it once a month we sit down and have a cup of coffee and just talk about our kids? So
Mhm.
we're helping them build strategies and systems to avoid future conflict. I will also say, which was the case in my marriage, or I should say in my divorce. Little Freudian slip there. As our kids were moving into their tween and teen years, as you know, Bryce, they can get pretty spicy and obstinate and sometimes even mean spirited towards their parents. And
Sure.
well, dad and I, for a hot minute, we thought, these kids are turning into monsters towards me. It must be his fault. What is he doing? What is he saying? And he's like, well, what are you doing? I feel like I'm being alienated and they're disrespectful. Da, da, da. So we did go back to an LCSW. We were like, we just need a third party. And one of the hallmarks too is it's limited scope, right? So when I do co-parent counseling, I'll say I need 3 months. When Michael and I went to find a therapist we'd never worked with before, like we need to talk some stuff out and we need someone in the room to help us hear each other because we're not hearing it. We
Mhm.
want 4 sessions. And that's all we did. And you know what we learned, Bryce?
What?
He was not my enemy and I was not his enemy. Oh, we have a common enemy in our house. It's the teenagers.
Yes.
And more than ever, we had to come back together in a new way. Our kids were 5 and 7 when we moved into 2 homes. So
Mhm.
when they were now 13 and 15 and like, uh-oh, here come the cars, the condoms, and college. And we're going to talk about all of it
Yes.
as parents in order to keep our children safe, protected, and supported.
Yeah. Yes. Hard, right? And they do
Yes.
sometimes, I mean, kids can pin us against each other, right? And they're not looking at us, right? They're looking at what they feel like is in their best interest and has very little to do with us personally, but we can definitely take it personally.
There's been more than one occasion when Michael and I have sat down with both of us with one of our children.
Mhm.
When something didn't go down right, like, oh no, they're both in the living room. This isn't going to be good. Because they know if there's something going down or we get a call from the school or there's a concern or another family, we're both going to be there.
Yeah.
We are your parent team. That
Mhm.
has not changed. We both love you more than any other humans on this planet. That has not changed. We were handed a job description response. Well, we didn't really get a job description, but a responsibility when you were born
Yes.
to care for you.
Mhm.
And so that's what we're going to do. And it was so funny just recently. May my daughter never hear this episode, but she's 20 now and she was alone at home, um, staying in an apartment that I have adjacent to my house during her second year of college. And she was really having a meltdown one night and she called me. She couldn't find a thing and this was due. And she just in a full young adult spiral.
Mhm.
First thing I did was send a message to her dad and said, hey, are you free right now? Can you go over to my house and check in on our daughter? Then she got a call from dad. Then she texted both of us. Hey, I don't really appreciate my parents ganging up on me. Oh, yeah. We're like, well, that's precisely what our job duties are, is
Yes, we're doing
to
this
be
together.
in partnership on your behalf.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm a single parent household. I am not a single parent.
Mhm.
I have a co-parent. I have a support parent. I have someone who I trust endlessly and highly respect and love him as the parent to my children.
Mhm.
And if you can leave your marriage with that intact, I used to always say, leave while there's still love, leave while you still like this person, leave while there's still respect, because you're going to need that to
Mhm.
be the boat that carries you down this river of life together.
Yeah. Which I think is so hard, It's so hard to know when that time is. I think for a lot of couples to figure out when is the time to end this if it's not savable.
And I'll just mention as another resource to your listeners, Bryce, there is something called discernment counseling. And I'm looking forward to doing this training. There are several folks like yourself in the mental health profession who go on to do another certification as discernment counseling. And it's exactly as you think. We're trying to discern. It's 5 sessions total.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very specific questions, right? Like, why are we here? When will we know we are done? What would need to change in this marriage for it to continue? Are you willing and able to do that? And through that process, not we're just in couples counseling. We're in, are we in or out conversation?
Yeah.
I
love that you're teaching me something right now. I love that.
Discernment counseling. And just because we talk about divorce doesn't mean we're going to get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that word so often is weaponized and it gets used in the height of an angry fight with your spouse. Well, if you want to, then we might have to start talking about divorce. And if you never, and well, I could divorce it. Like, no. What if we had a really sensible conversation, heartfelt, like, I don't know where you're at, but I am really starting to question whether or not this relationship is creating the right environment for all of us to thrive. I feel like the kids are getting more exposed to our negativity. I don't feel like I'm the best version of myself. Can we explore this? And exploration is very different than a threat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, because I mean, if you feel threatened, you're going to get defensive, right? And then we're game on. We're exploring something or even engaging something. Yes. Right. And if we're engaging divorce and we're using it as a tool, but it's not a punishment or some way to hurt the other person. And that's the strategy that we're using. I think you're right. That can be for good. Thank you so much, Karen. I mean, all of this has been so incredibly helpful. I feel like so many families are going to benefit from this information and also knowing that there is such a thing as a good divorce.
Absolutely. It is one of your choices. Yes. Thank you so much for providing a platform to amplify these changes and to allow all of us to become accidental experts.
I hope that today has brought you hope and that Karen has outlined for you how it is possible for you to get a good divorce. It doesn't have to be tumultuous, full of conflict. I know that many of you are going to see this as an opportunity to change how you're getting divorced from your spouse and to look at divorce as an opportunity to renegotiate what your family looks like and restructuring. With that, I will say, please take a minute to subscribe to our show. If you would be so kind as to hit that subscribe button, and also do me a favor. If you have heard an episode that has really made an impact on you, will you share that with a friend or family member that you think could also benefit from our show? With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. See you next week.
Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.